We are concerned not merely with the technical problem of securing and maintaining peace, but also with the important task of education and enlightenment.
Off camera, Grant, we were chatting a bit about Francis Swan and the Betty Hill connection.
It's a bizarre story. Yeah, this is one of the more interesting stories. This has actually been documented. So what happens is this sort of synchronicity where Betty Hill, who is when the Greys start, the blondes, the humans all stop in about the time when Betty Hill comes on, and then suddenly everybody turns to Greys.
No one was talking about Greys before.
No.
That's right.
And after Betty Hill, it was really all the contactees from the 1950s just sort of faded away. I mean, it was sort of like they never happened. So I always said seemed to be this connection between Francis Swan, who was the last of the contactee things, and the beginning of the Greys with Betty Hill. And then I discovered they lived like down the street from each other. And people said it wasn't down the street, but it was pretty close. It was within a couple miles.
Could you do a little bit of a background on Francis Swan?
Well, okay, yeah, so Francis Swan was the main psychic that was being used by CIA, Navy intelligence, Canadian government. Everybody was in contact with this woman because everybody believed that this woman was in contact with something. She had some information. They could pull this information.
She was a clairvoyant.
She was just a woman who suddenly started to channel. She may have had some psychic stuff before, but she just suddenly, in 1953, had this encounter where she meets this guy, and then suddenly this noises in her ear. She starts getting these messages from AFFA and Ponar, who are flying these two big giant spacecrafts around the Earth. And this is how it starts with her. And so that's 1954, and then 61, Betty Hill is in Canada. And I think she even had contact with the Smiths. So she's coming back, and she gets abducted, and she lives in, Francis Swan is in Elliott, Maine. And on the other side of the river is New Hampshire, Portsmouth, New Hampshire, where Betty Hill lives. So they're very close. So when Betty got abducted, then the story I heard was they went to Nightcap, and they told Kehoe. Kehoe said, "Come on, the aliens are grabbing people off a road. Like, get out of here." He used to fight. There was a story that he would fight with Smith. I don't believe it. You got this contact. You're talking to aliens. This is all contactees are all hoaxers. It's all garbage. He was in a real nuts and bolts guy. It was just like, you know, let's get this thing. But they weren't making any contact, and they definitely weren't abducting people. So they didn't really want to deal with Betty Hill, and so Admiral Knowles, who was on the Nightcap board, as was Wilbur Smith, said, "Oh, I'll take you. This Francis Swan woman, she's talking to aliens. I'll take you, and you can talk to her. She'll tell you what's going on. What happened to you?" So they take her. This is the story. They take Betty Hill over to Francis Swan's place, and she starts telling their story, and she mentions these Greys. And they took me, and Francis goes, "Greys? Greys? You were talking to Greys? They're the evil ones." And so she basically didn't want to talk to her anymore. Just basically leave. I'm not going to talk to you. And so there's other people coming, and the story I wanted to link to you is this one. So 54.
Didn't she say that she had to leave the house? She got really upset at Betty, and she said
she told Betty to get out of the house.
Wow.
Because you're dealing with the evil ones. I'm dealing with the gods are the AFFA and his boys are from God, and yours are demons. Well, the same debate that's going on now. You demons, get out of here. I'm not going to talk to you. So in 54, Navy intelligence gets involved, and they hear about through Knowles is an admiral in the Navy, so he's pushing the story that this woman's got this contact. So these two Navy intelligence guys go and visit her. The SB, who's the head of Navy intelligence, sends these two guys to go and talk to Francis Swan in Elliott. So they fly up to Elliott and they talk to her, and they say, "Yeah, it's got this weird thing. doing this automatic writing and talking to these aliens and giving answers to questions and stuff like that. And then not much happens till 1959, and then for some reason these Navy intelligence guys fly back to Maine, apparently to get flight time for their flight license or something. That was the excuse they used for going up there. And it was at that point when Francis Swan says these two guys are all interested. Do this channeling, talk to ask them this. She says, well, why don't I just show you how to do it? And the guy goes, oh, you can do that? She said, yeah, sit down. So she puts her hand on his right shoulder, and suddenly it's like, his hand starts doing that automatic writing. And he gets really excited. I mean, he's like, holy cow, I'm talking to this AFFA guy now. So they go racing back from Elliott, Maine, back to Washington, D.C., and they go to the National Photographic Interpretation Center. So this is one of the most top secret CIA buildings in Washington. This is where they analyzed all the U-2, all the SR-71, and all the spy photographs. This is where they took it. And there was a joke, it was in the most rundown part of Washington, above this car dealership. And that all the poor people that lived around there thought that this is where they were printing money. The government was printing money. Because there was so much security around the building. And they go, what's they securing this car dealership thing for? And they had this thing, and that's why they hid it there. That's the last place the Russians would look for, this top secret building where they were analyzing all these films. The guy that ran it was Arthur Lundell. So now you have Ron Pandolfi, who's, now I think there's a guy after Ron Pandolfi. I've actually seen the guy's photograph, but there's a guy after Ron Pandolfi, but Ron Pandolfi ran the Weird Desk. He was hired by Kit Green, who ran the Weird Desk till '83, and before Kit Green ran the Weird Desk was Arthur Lundell. So Arthur Lundell, and we actually, when Dest and I were in Tucson, his files were there, the correspondence between James McDonald and Arthur Lundell.
Oh, yeah.
Because Lundell was heavily into UFOs, and he would basically say the same thing you're saying now. We really don't know what's going on, but it's a really interesting subject.
McDonald had a lot of files too.
Yeah, but it was really, like, he had real hard handwriting, little tiny handwriting. It was very hard to read. I had how many cases? There was like 135 cases. I mean, you'd be there for months to try to go through all that stuff. And so that's what we were doing when you're doing it. You're trying to figure out, like, which files should we be looking at. And Dest got lucky with this metal thing. We're just sort of looking at file boxes and what's in the file boxes and trying to guess which one we should take, because we were only there for a couple of hours. And so Arthur Lundell ran the National Photographic Interpretation Center. So these two guys, the one worked for him, CIA and Navy, worked CIA and Navy. So he goes back and he says, Arthur, she taught me how to do this channeling thing. I'm talking to this AFFA. And he said, hey, okay, great. Sit down, let's talk to AFFA. So they sit him down in the National Photographic Interpretation Center, and he starts to do this channeling thing. And Art Lundell is running the whole thing. He's running, he's asking the questions. And they have these CIA guys in there, and he says, you know, there's actually the transcript. It's asked him, like, is there going to be a third world war? Is you know, Roman Catholics the prime religion? And all these weird questions they're asking, and AFFA's answering or whatever. And then Art Lundell says, we'd like some proof that you are for real. And then AFFA, this guy changes from automatic writing to voice. He says, what do you want? Art Lundell said, we'd like you to show yourself. He said, when? Now. Go to the window. And so he'd go to the window, and over top of the Capitol, flying saucer in the middle of the day was flying by the window, over top of the Capitol. And then in '75, so I'm friends with Bob Emenegger, who did the documentary UFOs Past, Present, Future, which was later done as UFOs It Has Begun in 1979. And then in 1983, they came back and said, oh, the government liked what you did in the 1970s. They'd like you to do another documentary. And they wanted Valet and they wanted Hynek to be involved, and they didn't want to get involved, so the whole thing fell apart. They realized it was going to be a scam. They were going to get stuck into this thing, and they would pull the film at the last minute, because that was the whole Holloman Air Force Base film. So Lundell comes to Bob Emenegger, and he says, oh, we got this story we'd like you to put in. And you got to remember, like, this story nobody knew, this story about the channeling of this alien at the National Photographic Interpretation Center. And so Emenegger was actually in Washington. He actually was in the building. And then he said to Art, he says, well, it's an interesting story. I mean, this, you know, channeling and stuff. And they actually gave him a handwritten version of the memo that was written for it, that was written by Friend, I think. It was kind of confusing how it was written, but it was a handwritten. So it's not the actual document, it was a handwritten 11-page document, which we actually put in the book. We put part of this, 3 pages of this document in the book about this channeling thing. because the whole 11 pages would just take up a lot. So anyway, we put in 3 pages. And then so Bob Anninger says to him, well, so you're going to go on camera and tell us a story? He says, no, I can't go on camera. He said, well, you got to tell a story. You go on camera. He said, Bob, I can't go on camera. Well, why can't you go on camera? I'm on duty. Still CIA. Still, he was the guy that briefed Kennedy. He's the guy that went in.
This is Lundahl?
Yeah, Lundahl. When Kennedy did the whole thing with the Cuban Missile Crisis, they had the guy came in with the photographs that showed the launch tubes and the stuff in Cuba and stuff. It was all U-2 photographs. It was Lundahl who did the briefing of the president. So he was this high-level guy. And he said, no, I can't go on camera. So in UFOs Past, Present, Future, they have Robert Friend, who was the head of Blue Book at the time. And Robert Friend goes in and tells this whole story. And he's standing in the room, and he goes and points to the window. And you can actually see the window, and you can see the Capitol in the background. So they did this channeling thing. And then, so I'm talking to Francis Swan. There was a story came out. There was a magazine came out in the 1980s that seemed to be one of these things where you sort of question the guys that were writing the articles. Is this the government running this magazine? It was really sort of high-end magazine. It was like weird stories, but like a lot of background stuff where you're thinking, man, these people know something. And the one was about Francis Swan. And it was, this article was done about her and about Larson. I think Larson, I think, was the guy they sat down and learned to channel. And the story was that he had come back to her. And he had said, I can't get rid of them. They're in my dreams, they're bugging me. And
was this the guy who had the NDE?
No.
No?
No. This is a guy that was showed how to channel. He was the guy that was in the channeling thing at the CIA. But this thing had followed him, and it was haunting him. And she said, I told you. I told you not to deal with them. I told you. And her version was that he was dealing with the Greys. And I warned you, and you would listen to me, and you went on your own, and now you're coming to me to get rid of them, and stuff like this. And this is this whole deal, this story. It goes into the 1980s of this guy being haunted by these beings that had, almost like the hitchhiker thing they're talking about now. He was trying to get rid of them. And I don't know what she did for him, but she would, when I corresponded with her, she really couldn't write. I mean, she had no education at all.
You reached out to her and you talked to her?
Yeah, I'd send her these letters. We did the handwriting at the time, and she would just put something in the margin. And sometimes I couldn't figure. She said, "Read your Bible," and the God is a good one, and all. There's a lot of.
Did she ever mention working with a guy named Gottlieb?
No. No, she didn't volunteer anything. She just answered my questions, and it was very sort of brief. Because she was like a woman that was not high profile, and nobody really knew about her. Like the government was dealing with her quite a bit, and she would correspond with the Smiths. I don't know what happened to a lot of that correspondence, but Kathy Martin has talked about her. That Kathy Martin contacted her daughter and recovered some of the material from the daughter. And there's actually some transcripts that we may get. We've got the actual transcripts from 1954. So if we can get them in a PDF form. And they were sent to me, I think Eric Davis provided them to me. And they're actual transcripts of her channelings in 1954 when the whole thing started. So Knowles...
54 she was channeling?
Started in the end of 53 and 54.
Shit.
So Knowles is the neighbor. So Knowles and his wife go in there and they're transcribing, and they're all just blown away by this woman getting all these messages. So we've got, I'd say, 100 pages. So we may put that in like a book type thing where we just get PDFs and put them in there. And you can read them. Some of it's pretty goofy. I mean, it's a lot of religious stuff, and some of it seems pretty wild stuff. But it is the actual transcripts from 1954. So there's all these weird things going on behind it. And the interesting thing was that Navy intelligence, like they said in the FBI, they talked about the Navy intelligence file. So I actually filed an FOIA to get Francis Swan's Navy intelligence file. And what you see now is, if you look at Lou Elizondo and stuff, that's all Navy. And the question is, and Bob Lazar said it was all Navy. And when I asked the Smith people, I said, we were always trying to find out who was Smith talking to in the United States? Who was he getting this material from? And then they said, yeah, we think it was Navy. He was talking to these Navy people. And that the whole idea behind that I'm just guessing. But when the UFO thing starts in 1947, there was no U.S. Air Force. There's just the Navy. So the Navy's got all the research money and has their own Air Force. They have everything, and so when the UFO thing starts and Roswell happens or whatever, then the Air Force comes along and says, "Oh, we're going to take over UFOs." No, you're not. We got the research money. We're in charge of this. So it's always this idea that the Navy actually may be the ones that are running the show, and that's where. So you have this Swan thing. You have again this Navy intelligence was very interested in her, and they had a file on her. And of course, when I said, "No, now we're going to file anything about this," and then what are you going to do? Unless you get a lawyer and you take them to court or whatever. But there was a lot of people that in the background where you saw this stuff going on, but nobody really recorded it. It was sort of lost, and everybody was hiding. The same as now, like in inner circle people were all sort of hiding. They didn't want to be known who they were or whatever. And I sort of tracked these guys down.
So everyone from Wilbert Smith all the way up to Lundahl, all looking into this lady Frances Swan.
Yeah.
Over what time span?
54 was that's when it all started, when Navy intelligence got involved with her through Admiral Knowles, when he sent the letter to the president. The FBI files are 54. Then in 59 was this thing, and the other part of the story to end it is when they do the channeling thing. This is 59, July of 59. Lundahl's blown away by this. He's just like, wow, this is cool. So he, top secret, he calls friend, who's head of Blue Book at the time, at Wright Patterson. Need you to come to Washington right now. We got something to show you. So he flies to Washington, and this is 2 days later, and they take him in, and they explain the whole thing, and they sit this guy down, and they say, we're talking to this alien here, or whatever. And the guy he goes into trance again, and AFFA comes on, and then they go through the whole thing, and then they say, we'd like you to show yourself. And he said, no. He said, the time is not right, or something like that. And then, so in the memo that we put in the book, it has the actual FBI, CIA guys' names. There's about 7 CIA people. They actually name them, who they are.
Name them
they're in this.
on what?
They're in this meeting, the second meeting. So the second meeting is a transcript of a memo as to what happened in meeting number 1, where the thing flies by the window. So meeting number 2, friend is in there, and friend handwrites this thing, or somebody handwrites this thing, and it has the whole thing. It's 11 pages. It describes exactly what happened 2 days before, thing flying by the window, and in this meeting, friend is there, and all these CIA guys are in the room, and they're all talking, and Lundahl's in the room, and they're discussing what's happened, and they put this guy in trance, and AFFA won't show up. He said, no, time's not right. So friend goes back to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and we actually have the general. I think we talk about in the book. He goes to the general, his commanding general, and he said, this was amazing. He said, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen in Blue Book. He said the guy's Adam's apple was moving up and down. He said, something was going on here. The guy was in something. And the general says to him, another agency has control of it. Hands off.
Wow.
And that's where it ends.
That's pretty neat. That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
And so a UFO flew by the window. Multiple people saw it.
In the middle of the day.
Navy guys.
Oh, it's CIA guys.
CIA guys.
CIA guys. Navy intelligence and CIA.
And you got documents.
And we've got the thing, but the thing is, it's a handwritten. It's always this plausible liability thing.
Right.
It's a handwritten document, and I think, well, I got that from Jacques Vallée, because when I put the story out, Jacques Vallée, it came and it said, somehow, like Jacques says, you got the story, here's the document. And then there was this handwritten thing from Robert Friend or whatever. So it was coming through Vallée and through Eric Davis.
So Jacques heard about you talking about it?
He saw that I had done the story
the
about what was going on, and he said, here's the memo you're talking about.
Oh, right on.
This
That's
memo
great.
that details what's going on. But the thing is, it's not they call it the CIA memo, but it doesn't have a heading on it, and it's handwritten. And then there was a story that he saw it on Friend's desk, that Hynek handwritten this thing, that Hynek had seen it on Friend's desk. They realized how important it was, and he wrote the thing. So there's this controversy about exactly who wrote the document. But it does go through the whole thing. We put 3 pages of it that basically describe how it starts, the CIA guys' names and stuff like that. So you see that kind of stuff that's going back on in the 1950s that indicate like it was all open season. Like as I was mentioning today, this thing with McMonagle, which kind of surprised me, where he was doing a remote viewing. Everybody knew he was doing a remote viewing. But he also said that the military had him doing out-of-body stuff. So the military actually believes the out-of-body thing. And they were using it to do intelligence. So they would get him to go out of body. They would first give him a target. And he said remote viewing was better. Because with remote viewing, you were blind to the target. Whereas, and he always said, you try to clean your mind, and what you don't clean out of your mind will interfere with the signal you're getting. And
Explain who he is, quick.
He's the 001. He's the top remote viewer for the U.S. military. He was the first remote viewer that they named. He had a near-death experience. He was recruited. He was in all 3 remote viewing programs. He's done it for 50 years, remote viewing. He's written a lot of stuff on it, and so he's like a key guy. But what he had said was that the military, he was in these programs, and he said he sort of backed out because the military, you have to sort of, I can't remember the word he was, but you have to sort of separate yourself from your morality, that kind of thing, where you give it to the military and whatever they're going to use it for, they're going to use it for. And he said he just couldn't do it. But what they had him doing was the remote viewing targets of like Russian and all these different targets, wherever. But then they were doing out-of-body experience stuff, which indicates that the intelligence knows that the out-of-body experience. And if the out-of-body experience thing is right, then like consciousness, where does this go? I mean, this is for real. You have a part of your entity that can move around the planet, and they were using it to spy. And so they would get him to do these targets. And I remember Russell Targ talking about, and I've always tried to find out, I've never been able to find it. I remember him talking about it, where he had this girl that he was his assistant. She'd never done a remote viewing or anything like that. And then they gave her a target one time. She was the best. She was better than Ingo Swan. And so he gave her the target. And I remember him talking about he had her out of body inside the Kremlin, inside Brezhnev's office. And she reported that there was red leather on the door with these tacks, these gold tacks in the metal, in the leather, and that she could see that it overlooked the Kremlin, the big courtyard, and that there was a door. And he said, well, go in the door. What's in the door? And she said, there's a computer room below in that door. Going down below, there's a computer room. So this is the thing that the military was using out-of-body experience stuff for spying. And to me, that's the most significant, because remote viewing, you can say, well, you're just telepathic, getting in your head. But out of body, you're going out of body, that you're actually moving around, like you actually have a soul that moves around. I mean, that's pretty significant. The military was actually doing this kind of stuff, that they admitted this was real. Back then.
And who knows what they're doing now.
Yeah, and so he said he stopped doing that because he didn't believe it was as accurate. Plus, he said that the problem was that the way they would do it, instead of just giving you a number, which takes you away, that you empty your mind, that you're not being this analytical overlay where your left brain is getting in there and giving you all sorts of stupid ideas and guessing and stuff like that, where you just have a number. This way, they would take a photograph and show him the photograph and say, go to the building. And he said it would take him 6 or 7 times. He'd have to go out of his body 6 or 7 times to get to the target, and that would take him like a couple of days or whatever. And then when he finally got it, then they would just say, oh, you researched it. And they wouldn't believe him. And then he said, well, forget that nonsense. I'm not going to waste my time with that. He did that, and he also did the thing with lucid dreaming, which kind of surprised me with lucid dreaming. They were using lucid dreaming to target, and they said when you do lucid dreaming and you do remote viewing at the same time, he said it's really, really accurate. But he said the problem, and I'd never heard this before, he said lucid dreaming, you had false awakenings. And he said when you were in it, you'd false awakening, and then you'd go back in, false awakening, go back in, false awakening. And he thought it was actually dangerous, that you couldn't control it. You didn't know which you were in. And then the girl that asked him the question said, have you ever written this down? And he said, no, things that I think that are dangerous to people, I don't write down. No. And he said that's why they stopped it, because he said, I can control it. I had, and even he had trouble, but he said if somebody else would actually get stuck in the lucid dream state and couldn't get out. That was his contention. And when you hear him talking about this kind of stuff, you realize they may be way down the road in terms of understanding what do they know about consciousness, what do they know about out-of-body experiences, especially if they're into lucid dreaming. I mean, that's the whole deal. You're in your dream and you're moving around and you're being able to target things and move stuff. But there was this, I never heard that before, this thing about, because I only had lucid dream one time. It's like when I talk about why I did the psilocybin. Because I tried meditation and I didn't really get anywhere, channeling didn't get anywhere, and I tried lucid dreaming. I mean, I tried everything for lucid dreaming. I had all the books, I watched all the videos and stuff like that. And the one time I got lucid. At one time, and I remember, I was with a guy that used to work at the university, and we were on Highway 75 going to the United States, and we were in this field, and he's got like stooks of grain, and he's got these stooks of grain, and he throws it up in the air, and it goes, whoosh, and it starts to swirl. And then I thought to myself, hey, that's kind of weird. I must be in a dream. And then I go, oh, I'm lucid. And I go, you gotta stay calm, because you know this thing, you gotta stay calm, you gotta stay calm. And I said, they say, well, you gotta spin like a figure skater. So I go, oh, I gotta spin. And then I spun to stay lucid, and so I wouldn't come out. And all of a sudden, I wake up and I'm in my office at the university. And then I go, ah, shit, the one time, and I blew the whole thing. And then a couple hours later, I woke up in bed. Because I forgot that when you do the spin, when you spin, you don't stay in the same spot, you go into a different reality. And so I was in my office, still dreaming in the lucid dream, and I thought, oh shit, I blew it, you know. But that was the only time I ever got. So I knew this thing about the lucidity and how powerful it was. That is, the idea is when you get lucid in your dream, you can basically ask any question you want, and you'll get an answer. You'll have a voice that puts you in a position where you're in a something, and it's a scene, and you got to figure out what's going on. But they're giving you the answer to your question.
Almost like time travel.
It's this tapping in. That's what we did with the contact modalities. Is that there's a field that has all the answers. And there's ways to get in the field. And if you can get in the field, how Desta gets in the field, or how with psychedelics or whatever, if you can get in the field and get that material and bring it back, that's the whole concept. And when you hear the military is using people to go into the field and out-of-body experiences and to spy on people or to use lucid dreaming, that they're way down the road in terms of understanding what's actually going on here.
Absolutely. Man, it blows my mind to think about that, eh?
But it's encouraging. I mean, it gives you validation that we've been right all along, that this stuff actually does exist. And people can deny it all they want, but when you see the military is doing this stuff top secret, and they got people non-disclosure agreements signing or whatever.
They're not going to say anything, no one
Yeah.
will know.
Yeah, and they're using it for evil intentions, which would make sense in the way I've sort of seen it lately, is that everything's neutral. So people think that there's, you know, these good things affecting you, bad things, but it's all neutral, and that you're creating it. And it was this, that's where I got that real fear thing when I had this thing where, you know, I'm afraid I'm going to die, and then I get into the lucid dream state, or the psilocybin thing, and they go, yep, you're going to die. Absolutely, for sure. You're not getting out of this. And I go, what? Nope, that's it, you're gone, man, you're gone. And it's like they're killing the ego. But it's you get that thing where you're in it, and then you hear that they're doing it. It gives you this sort of validation that, yeah, you just got to figure this thing out. Or the idea where we're in, pointed out lots of times, that experiencers, people who did the free survey, 40% of them say at one point during their experience they knew the answer to everything in the universe.
That's right.
21% of them say they knew the answer to everything about themselves. In near-death experiences, 31% of all people who've had near-death experiences said during their experience, at one point they knew the answer to everything in the universe. And that's this really important concept that we put in contact modalities, was the idea that, yes, if there's no time and space, there's everything may be in the field, and its ability to access the field and pull the material out of the field. And when you hear the military has been doing this for years, then you go like, shit, we got this, we just got to move it along and maybe try to find out what they're doing, or it gives you validation that you, and these are the most important things you can think of in life. I mean, what can be more important than the fact that you can actually leave your body and that your consciousness can exist part of your body? This is the ultimate thing. Yeah, it's the whole thing. Like, why are we here? This starts to answer those questions. And yet they're using it for these nefarious purposes of, you know, trying to, you know, haunt the enemy or do whatever. And that's why I said they went to Skinwalker Ranch. And I'll guarantee I'm right on that. The reason I went to Skinwalker Ranch is not because some 480-acre ranch in Utah was a threat to national security. It was like, how the hell do they do that? Like, what the? We got to figure this thing out. All this stuff's going on there. If we can study it and figure out what's going on, we can use this against our enemies. And that's why they went there. And that's why they spent $22 million. It really had, you know, very little to do with UFOs. UFOs may be in part of it as part of the paranormal phenomena, but people have bought into it. But I think, and I don't know how you feel, but I mean, you look at it and you go like, you're in the whole thing about what is life about. We're spending our whole time trying to figure out why we're here, where we're going, or whatever. And most people haven't even got a clue. They don't think about that until you know, somebody
Yeah,
says you got the 3 weeks to live, you better get your stuff together, and then you go, what the hell's going on here?
I mean, the important philosophical questions, a lot of people don't explore that, right?
Yeah,
And I think that's what's really neat about UFOs and the remote viewing and the paranormal is it is all about those philosophical questions and exploring that, right?
Even though you don't know, because I remember in '75, I've mentioned this numerous times, when I saw it the first night, I was blown away. I mean, it was really close. Second night, when it came at me, and then it made the turn and made a left-hand turn. And years later, I'm thinking to myself, why did it come at me and then make the left-hand turn? Why didn't it just go from there to there? Why did it come here to me and then make the left-hand turn? It was like, well, it wanted to come real close. And then it took off. And so it was just flying away the second night. That's when I looked at it and I go, it might be a ET from another planet. I thought, oh, this is so cool. And then I'm thinking, what's it doing? It's just, like, it's not doing anything. It's just like the same night. It was just, first night it was just flying along. Second night I'm going, what the hell's it doing? And I went to Bob Deemert. And I said, Bob, well, why did it come here? Like, what's it doing? Like, what's going on here? Because Carmen had nothing. I mean, it's 2,000 people. It's in the middle of a farm. There's no industry. There's nothing. And it's like, well, what's it doing? And that's what it came down when I got the 2012 download with the consciousness thing. He said, you want to know what happened in 1975? You want to answer a question, what's going on? This is what it is. It's consciousness. And then you start to realize it's not UFOs. It's much more complex than UFOs. Right. It's this. It all goes to this thing about out-of-body experiences, life after death, why we're here, is it soul contract, are we coming in, and stuff like that.
Do you think the phenomenon influences people? Do you think UFOs show themselves to people to influence them throughout their life, or do you think it might be something different, maybe something that's already pre-programmed, like you were set up to see that? Any thoughts on that?
Well, that's called a theory. Wow, I'll eventually write a book on it. It's the whole idea about, I remember Kathy Martin, so there's this whole idea in ufology is, are there evil aliens that are, victimizing people and grabbing them and doing all this kind of stuff, or, as a lot of experiencers say, no, I agreed to this. This is part of the deal. It's hard to, I remember I asked Kathy Martin, I said, Kathy, what do you think about, first I asked Mary Rado, I said, Mary, if you were, she'd done like 4,000 regressions, whatever. I said, Mary, if you regress everybody back to birth and you ask them, these abductees, did you plan this? I mean, is this random or did you choose this? And how many people will say, yeah, I chose this? And she said, oh, like 100%. And I go, well, thank you. And then I was interviewing Barbara Lamb, and they didn't get it. We had the tape. I think you just put the tape up, where I was on this thing on the States. It's this new thing, I can't remember what they call it. It's where everybody goes in on their cell phones and stuff. And the first 2 hours we put up, but the second 2 hours I had Barbara Lamb. Barbara Lamb came on. And I go, Barbara Lamb? Hi. And I started interviewing her. And for an hour I interviewed her and asked her the same question. I said, Barbara, what do you think about soul contract? Do you think that people are coming in here that... She says, oh yeah, for sure. I mean, absolutely. And then I asked Kathy Martin. I said, Kathy, well, what do you think about the soul contract thing? That people agree to this. This is all they're part of the family and it's all arranged or whatever. And she said, I always wondered about that myself. She said, so I had myself regressed back to birth, and I heard the words come out of my mouth. I agree to this. And so that's the whole idea. Is this idea of how much is random? That was the 2017 download I got. One of the things was, is the world random? Or is it pattern? If it's random, that's one world.
Do you have free will, or is it
Well, that's what they asked McMonagle today, when I listened to this podcast today, and he said, no, it's not. It's this idea where you have all these different routes, and it can, the farther away you get, the more it can change. That you do have this. Although you have the thing where Desta had you had this thing that happened where you said you're just living out your life. What I would say is that definitely before you're born, if you look at the Michael Newton thing, you're planning your life. You're saying, okay, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to work on love and envy and whatever you're going to work on, and you plan it, and then you set that up. So the things, but even inside the life, it seems like they're...
Did he use the analogy of the tree with the branches?
Yeah. But
yeah, so...
Des is the one you should get on camera. She's the expert at this.
Yeah, I know.
Because she's actually... She does the same thing that I do. So we're working on the same principle, and she's using a different technique. It's like, I want to figure this out. That's all I'm interested in, is I want to figure this out. So she's working on these techniques. How do I get in there? How do I ask questions and stuff like that? And she's working in there. So she was asking this specific question. this whole thing about the free will and how does it work, and she was getting these messages that basically were contrary to what she had thought she had gotten before,
Right.
where they sort of shift you around. That's always a big question. Hal Puthoff one time questioned this thing about free will. But I would say, ask Desna. I would say.
I thought the
'Cause it is a-
analogy of the tree was really interesting. So you have the major branches on the tree, which would be the unshiftable timeline, and then you have the smaller branches on the tree, which
Yeah.
are ones that you can influence and change. But you're not going to change much because that branch is still going
Yeah.
a certain
Well,
direction.
one of the ideas I did get recently, and I think it'll probably turn out to be true, is Mark Sims. If you've ever seen him, he had the being Tejbar.
Yeah.
So Tejbar comes and Tejbar shows him this almost like the Michael Newton thing. Like you have these little things that get bigger and bigger in animals, and it works up to humans, and then you go up and at the end, you're creating galaxies. You're there, and the whole idea is God did not create the heaven and the earth, because we always fall into the materialistic paradigm, the fake materialistic thing, where we believe it's all matter. And when you look at the quantum physics guy said there is no matter as such, mind is the matrix of all matter, and this thing that consciousness is primary. That was the thing that told me in 2017. Is it made out of little nuts and bolts? That is, that's one world, but if it's made out of consciousness, that's a different world. If it's all made out of consciousness, then God did not create the heaven and the earth. God just created the sparks of the divine, and we're creating the universe. We're the ones that create the universe, and the universe is getting, as we think and as we develop things, it gets more and more complex, and we do it as sort of like glory to the one or whatever, that the one cannot experience itself without duality. So we are out there, we're creating all this sort of stuff, and the universe is neutral. We're the ones that create all the good, the evil, the stuff. It's all made out of consciousness. Whereas we always fall back into the idea that God created the heaven and the earth. It's all material, and then He put us, and He put consciousness into put a soul and consciousness into us. And the other version is no, it's all consciousness. So we're the ones, it's all consciousness, and consciousness is just getting more elaborate and more, and we're developing this thing. It's all made out of matter. We're the ones that are creating the universe. And that's what Michael Newton would say, where he would talk to these people and say, what are you doing? And he said, I'm making a rock. And Newton says, you're making a rock? You really? Well, I'm not that advanced yet. I can't do animals yet. I'm doing a rock. And then the one was making this animal for some planet that was overrun by some particular vine or something. And these souls were in the between life, and they were making this animal that was going to go and try to balance this world out. And that makes more sense when you look at what happened with Mark Sims' thing, where the final 5 steps are you're creating stars, you're creating planets, you're creating, and up to galaxies. And I go, geez, that's what he got makes sense according to what Newton says, and this idea that creation is being done by consciousness, that it's all consciousness and it's all being created, and this idea that there's a God with a beard and he makes everything, the heaven and the earth, and then brings consciousness in later. We've got it completely backwards. Consciousness is not last, it's not an epiphenomenon of the brain. Consciousness is at the beginning. The consciousness creates the brain does not create consciousness. And that's the debate that we're at right now in terms of physics and understanding stuff, that when that gets resolved, then everything flips. And that's why probably this stuff with out-of-body experience stuff with the military is so important, or where they're using lucid dreaming stuff, where they're actually admitting, yeah, this is for real. This is how it works, that you can actually, be outside your body, and that consciousness is primary.
Is this some of the stuff you were pondering when you were doing your psilocybin experiments?
Oh, the psilocybin started with just to say, like, I didn't go with any questions. I just said, whatever I need to learn.
This is pretty deep stuff.
In the end, I would start asking those questions, like when I did the thing where, is my test going to come back? Am I going to die? So I would go in with stuff like that. But then it's ego. It's like me. I'm coming in. Me. Here I come. Me. And then they got ready for me. Yeah, you're going to die. Yeah. and then it took me like 3 sessions to learn. Oh shit! It's the ego thing again. But but when I first went in, all I said was, rather than me wanting to ask a question, is to say, what do I need to learn? What is the most important thing? And I had these, I can't remember what they were, but the 6, it was one after another. It was like lesson.
You were getting responses to those questions you were asking?
Well, no, I didn't ask any questions. I just said, what do I need to know? So the first one was compassion. Then I had death. And then I had fear and despair. One was all about despair. And it was like these lessons. So there would be nothing about the first one. There would be nothing more about compassion. It was like they didn't care about the kid in the cage anymore. It was like, oh, that kid, we've finished that kid now. We're on to despair. I think the second one was despair. It was like
Grief was one of them.
Grief and despair or something. And it was like each one, I thought this is great. It was like, okay, what's the next lesson? And just go in and I would just say, okay, what's the lesson for tonight? And I would just wait and be open to the message. And it wasn't until I got to what, number 18 where it started to get kind of weird, where it was like, Desta's really pissed off. I mean, she's angry, man. The whole session was going like, and I said, well, what should I do? What are we going to do about that? You better phone her up. So I phoned her up and said, Desta. That's what I didn't need to tell her what it was about. I go, this is weird. And you start getting those and you're going like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. This is good. It's almost like they ran out of stuff. They said, okay, we're going to play with you now. Or when I had the one where I said to the guy, you know, where they were giving me a hard time, and then I said, okay, I'm just here to learn stuff, man. I mean, what you keep ragging me on the ego thing. Like, tell me what the hell's going on. And the thing goes, we don't know. and there was those kind of experiences where I go, I don't want to do this because, you know, it's always like I'm up all night. I can't sleep. I can sit there for 13 hours. I can go, because what I do is for 4 hours, you're out of it, man. But after 4 hours, it's like you're just replaying the events in your head, and you're replaying them, and you're sitting there, and you can't sleep. You're just wired, and you're just you're playing the thing, and it goes on for hours and hours. And then so then I'm always afraid to do it because I do it like I have to wait till about 8 o'clock at night because you eat. I have to always eat. So then 8 o'clock at night, and then it's 4 hours till midnight, and then up till 5 o'clock in the morning, and then it's the whole day is just ruined. It's like it takes a whole day. That's why I'd like to have a session where I'd be in, say, New Brunswick or something where you don't have to worry about anything. You can do it in the morning or whatever. But it just got, in the end, it was kind of going kind of weird, and it was like, I don't know, it's like weird stuff. But the thing is to go and open and to say, you know, what do I need to know? And I know Desta was asking questions. She would do the question thing. And in the end, I had stuff I wanted to know because I was always fascinated with death, and I know death. I did have a big one on death, which they went through that whole thing. And when you're in it, you probably have the experience. When you're in it, it's like this is important. It's real. And it's like wow. I mean, you just think this is
pretty profound.
It's pretty profound, yeah. And yet the stuff I would like to be able to do. Like the out-of-body experience I've never had, and I've tried lots. I've tried the Lucid Dreaming. I tried everything you could possibly think of. I read everything that was ever written on Lucid Dreaming.
In the music and the paranormal.
Yeah.
Where you mentioned some of the musicians and some of the artists would go into a lucid dream-like state, or I forget the examples, but they would be right on the verge of falling asleep. They'd be nodding off, and they would snap themselves out of it, and they'd go into that place. You ever try anything like that?
I can do that. I can do a little bit of that where just before you go to sleep, or usually just after I wake up, where it's like, what's his name? Russell Targ says, this whole deal, when you wake up, and there's something like a dream you want to remember, or you've had a vision or something like that, don't move anything. Don't even move a finger. Because if you move your little finger, the left brain says, Matt's waking up. Let's go. He's waking up. And it shuts the filter, and then you even know you can see it going away. It's like water going down a toilet. It's like no, and you're trying to.
It's like you're having this really good dream, and then you wake up from it, but you're still half asleep, and you can remember it.
And we did that in the contact modalities. The hypnagogic or
hypnagogic and hypnagogic.
Yeah. So before you go to sleep, and that's what it is. So and it makes sense when you look at it. Desta's big into this too. We should actually have her interview with her. Is that you're in like is it alpha, and then you go down into theta, and you're going down into delta is at the bottom. So you're doing say delta. You got to go through theta to get to delta. So your sleeping is the bottom, but you got to go through theta to get there. So that's when you have this thing where you're sort of half asleep, and that's when it comes when you're in that theta state. So it's a way to find your way to get into the theta state, and there are all these methods. That's what we tried to do in the Contact Modalities book, is to put out the different methods. Well, these people did this, and then we'd learn all these really weird methods of like the Conans. I didn't know this thing about the Conan. I didn't know what they were. You know what these things are? It's an Eastern idea. What's the sound of one hand clapping? And that's the whole thing. It's these things that they don't have any answers.
Right.
So then they ask you, what's that sound of one hand clapping? And your left brain's going, no, figure it out here.
Who was the guy who used to hold
Conans,
the
and this is
metal
what they
ball
used
in
to-
his hand?
That's what I was gonna say. Was that Wheeler?
That's Edison. Thomas
Edison,
Edison.
yeah. And then
So he had
was-
3,000 pages, 2,500 patents that he filed, and that's how he did it. So he said, I don't sleep. Don't sleep at night. But he'd go in the lab, and of course,
I know that
he would
feeling.
sit there. He would sit there in a chair with his hand over the side of the chair, and you have a metal ball. There's actually a statue that was built where he's got the metal ball in his hand. And most people wouldn't even know what the metal ball means. But so he would have a metal plate on the bottom, and then he'd sit there, and because he hadn't slept all night, he would sit there and he would just sort of meditate. And then of course he'd fall asleep, and his hand would relax, and the ball would fall out of his hand and hit the plate in the bottom and wake him up. And then he'd quickly write down on his head, take the ball, put it back in his hand, and do this. And he'd do this repeatedly.
Wow. I wonder where
And
your
what he's
brain
doing
goes
is
in
he's
this
putting
thing.
himself down through theta as he's
yeah.
going into the
That's
delta
what it
state,
is.
into sleep. As he goes through theta, and as he's going into the delta, it wakes him up, and he quickly
And he
writes
just
down.
plucks something right out of there, and he grabs it. The last thoughts.
Yeah.
It's pretty neat.
And so there are all these different methods that you can use, and Desta's perfected a number of them. I mean,
That was
in
a
terms
great
of-
book, Music and the Paranormal. I think that's one of my favorites.
Yeah, and
I haven't read all the recent books yet, so I'll have to see.
yeah, and then that was again. I've had a lot of those those weird sort of synchronicities where, not synchronicities, but where I get the messages from beings. So the first one was Chris Bledsoe when he phones me up, 2014, whenever it was, and he said, "I got a message from the Guardians," and because I'd had the experience with the dog bleeding.
Yeah.
I knew, hey, this guy's the real deal. I mean, listen to this guy. You got a message. I was like, this is so cool, man. You got a message from the Guardians from me? Like, really? And he said, yeah. He said, they want you to know the message is in the music. And I go, well, Chris, you may be talking to the wrong guy here, Chris, because I don't listen to music. I don't play music. I could care less about music. And he said, oh, you should listen to the song Kashmir by Led Zeppelin.
Oh.
And I go, yeah, whatever, you know. And even years later, I was on an interview, and I said, I still haven't listened to it. And he emails me, he says, could you please listen to the song? After years, I couldn't care less. And so then he said, and the other song, and this is how they drag you in. And you start to realize, is this chance, or are you being dragged into this thing? Is this the theory of wow? So then he's talking, well, listen to Kashmir, and I go, hey, whatever, Chris, keep talking, I'm not going to listen to you. And then he says, well, the other one you should listen to is After the Gold Rush by Neil Young. And I go, Neil Young? I said, Neil Young's involved in this
And
thing?
she's from Winnipeg.
He
right?
grew up in Winnipeg. He
Yeah.
was born in Toronto. He grew up in Winnipeg, and they went to California. And I'm thinking, and I would make the joke. I mean, Winnipeg's the one place in Canada where even Canadians don't want to visit. I mean, and Neil Young grew up here, and I go, like, what's the chances that this UFO thing has got Neil Young and he's from Winnipeg? And then when I looked at the lyrics of the song, it was like, you know, we're treating the world like a gold rush, and when the gold is gone, it's going to become a ghost town, and the silver seeds are going to come and take the chosen ones off the planet to another star system. And I'm going like, you can't make this up. So I go, oh, I started researching it, and that's how I did the book. So then when Desta, and you probably heard this story, so then Desta and I have no interest. There's a girl from Toronto, I don't know if you know Teza Lawrence. She has a TV studio there. And so Teza is on this whole thing. She wants to option Charlie Red Star, the book Charlie Red Star. And she says, we need to get it published or whatever, and we'd like to option. I said, yeah, whatever, you wanna, whatever, you knock yourself out. And then she said, you know about this Mission Rama thing? And I said, yeah, I don't know. And then she tells me, she says, well, the reason I want to option your book, I want to do this thing on this Mission Rama group out of Peru. And I said, yeah, whatever, I don't care. You pay your option, I don't care what you're using it for. And she says, well, I tried to get a company to pick it up in Canada, nobody would finance it, because it's from South America, they couldn't care less. So what I want to do is I want to take your story from Charlie Red Star, and I'm going to change you into a reporter, and he's going to be running around Carmen, and he's going to be seeing these UFOs and this all developing, and then all of a sudden he discovers Mission Rama, and he flies to Peru and goes after Mission Rama, and then I can get it financed. And I said, yeah, whatever, you know, like whatever you want to do. Like, I don't really care. And then she says, would you like to read the script? And I said, no, not really. I don't really care. And I'm not interested. And it was like a month or maybe a month or 2 months later. So then Katerina was doing the books early on. She was helping with the books or whatever. And she says, oh, I'd like you to come to California, and we're going to meditate on Mount Shasta for world peace. And it's like, yeah, okay, whatever. You know. And then she kept going, you know, and she's just, oh, it's this Mission Rama group. And I didn't even connect it to the Teza Lawrence thing. So we're going to go, and I said, why? You know, and I said, I'm really not interested in Katerina. She kept going. I go, well, she's helping me with the book, so I should do it. I mean, okay, Katerina, I'll come. I'll sit on, I got nothing against, you know, I don't want her to sit on the mountain and meditate for world peace, but whatever, I'll come to California. So I contacted Destin and said, I just want to go to California. And so we go, and then we start down there, and we're coming across the Nevada desert. We're heading for Reno for the night, you know. And all of a sudden, Dustin's cell phone rings, and it's Katerina. It's just, I got a message from Ed Terrell. It's like, really? And after Chris Bledsoe, it was like, I learned the lesson. It's like, okay, get the message. What's the message? It's like, and it was from Katerina, had got it from Paula Harris, who'd got it from Ricardo Gonzalez, and Ricardo had said, Ann Terrell knows Grant's coming to the mountain, and there's going to be a program sighting Saturday night. So they have these program sightings where they determine what time it is to the minute when it's going to come, and then the thing flies by, whatever, and they do this meditation and all this kind of stuff, whatever. And then I was really hyped. It's like, I knew there'd been the portal thing. There'd been 2014, 2015 with the portal. And then, so I thought, oh my God, you know, I'd rather Desta go through the portal, or, you know, Katerina or whatever. I really don't go through the portal, but okay, well, I mean, if I can go through the portal, well, I gotta get ready. So I start, these guys are all eating, I'm fasting, you know.
I remember you guys going down on that trip. That was pretty
Because
interesting.
they fast, so I'm fasting, I'm not eating, you know, and I'm getting all ready, we can go through the portal, you know. And there was a program sighting, 9:33 exactly when they said. There was two people. One, a girl had a PhD from Columbia University in psychology. She got it, and Ann Terrell. And she said to not to Ann Terrell, to Ricardo. She said, "Look at your watch," and it was 9:33. This is when they said it would happen, and so I was blown away. I mean, I was just, and so then just the last year, I get involved with this we're called the Beings out of London. So this is one woman, she's African American lady who, or from Africa, who's got these, suddenly these beings are in her room, and they're talking to her, and they don't have any faces or anything, so they're talking this whole thing. We can be whatever you want. If you want us to be ETs, we can be ETs. We can take you to our planet if you want. But no, we're always been here. And they're claiming they're the creators. And they're giving her these messages, and then the next woman, she phones up her friend and says, "Oh, these beings are in my room." So what? She goes over, and then she gets involved, and they start getting these messages. So then the stuff they were giving me seemed like exactly the stuff. It's an illusion. It's, you know, simulated universe. They're not ETs. All this kind of stuff, and it was making sense. And so I got kind of interested. I had a couple of interviews with this woman, and then suddenly the first one, she phones me up. She says, "Oh, they want an interview with you. They want to talk to you." I go, "Really?" That's like, that's the thing with Ed Terrell, with Chris Bledsoe. I go, "Really? They want an interview? Okay, we'll have an interview." So that's when I asked them. I said, "Hey, like, are you ETs?" And they said, "Oh, we could be ETs if you want." And they start on this thing about illusion, and you're the visitor here, we've always been here, and stuff like that. And so that's my next big project. I've got these, but they're both dyslexic, and I've said to help write the book. But then when we went to the first interview, I don't know if you've seen it yet, but we went to the interview, and she was reading off the notes, and she's from the first couple of days when these beings came and stuff. But that's the kind of stuff I've gotten into, that sort of world where you start to wonder, this can't be chance. I mean, this can't be chance, that this may be my mission. Is that I'm supposed to, you know, all these beings come to me and they want these books written and they want their message out. Or even, you see this all the time with other people like Sherry Wild. I don't know if you know Sherry Wild's story. So Sherry Wild, and we've interviewed her a couple times. She can get a little dark, because it was pretty trying time for her. But she gets taken by this being by the name of Da, and she doesn't want anything to do with this, and she's trying to get out of it. And he said, "Have you forgotten the promise that you made?" And the whole thing was, the book is called The Forgotten Promise. So it's the soul contract. You came into the world, you agreed to do this. Now you're backing out of this, you agreed to do this. And so she said, she's fighting the whole thing and stuff like that. And she says she's on her computer the one day, and she looks at the computer, and the Word program is open. She goes, "I never use Word. What the hell's Word program doing open?" And she looks, and it's like page 3.5, and she starts to read it. She goes, "Oh no, we're not going there." And they had started to write the book. Page 3.5. And so then she wrote the book, and then as she read it, she thought, that's pretty good. And then she started working with the book, and then her daughter, or her family, got an injunction to stop her from publishing the book. And they because they're a small town in Wisconsin, and they're all real estate people, and it's like, we're gonna get destroyed if you come up with this stupid story about talking to aliens and stuff like that. So she had this, a lot of opposition in this sort of thing, and then she told us, in the last interview, I said, tell the story about being in the car with the, and she didn't really remember the story, but I said, the one with the screen, when they show you the screen. And she said, oh yeah. So she's driving along, and all of a sudden there's this 3D screen, and there's this thing on the screen, and she's like, what are you doing? I'm driving. I can't watch this screen. Like, what are you doing? And they said, oh, this is the opening to your movie.
What?
And you see this thing, you see this over and over again, where they, like I asked Nancy Tremaine, I said, did they encourage you to write the book? Oh yeah, I mean, a lot of people, you ask them, you know, did they help you write the book? Oh yeah, they helped me write the book. They wanted me to write the book. I didn't want to write it. And that's what you see, this whole thing, that it may not be as random as you think it is. It may not
Chris
be.
Bledsoe's story with the lady, the blue lady.
Yeah, and that was that was the idea. You've got a
Mission.
What do they call it? You have a burden, and it is yours to carry. And
it always makes me wonder, you know, like if you watch the phenomenon over time, you know, I've been following Chris Bledsoe's case for quite a while, and I always wonder, well, how does that affect Chris over time? And now I'm seeing it carry on into Ryan Bledsoe. You know, it's a pretty interesting story.
Yeah, it just
And
gets sort of.
He's got his own podcast now, saying some pretty profound things. Pretty interesting.
Yeah, they have got a lot of the message out through him. I mean, they're and you know, I think we did the book, and I don't think he would be quite as famous if we had pushed, because I pushed early on when people didn't know who he was, and the only reason that I really promoted him big was because I had the experience. It's the old deal. If you haven't had experience, you can be very skeptical. But if you're standing beside him and the dog starts to, you know, bleed, and his dogs are getting let out of the house, and all this weird stuff, and then you go like, wow, I mean, you can't really deny that. So you get a lot of these experiencers who will say, like Chris Bledsoe, same thing. They say, when the psychologist asked him in the regression, so when you first meet them, they've been with me since before I was born. And 25% of all experiencers say that they were told by the beings that they were in their last lifetime. So you get that kind of stuff where you start getting these polls, where you see these patterns. And to me, that's the critical thing that you and I have the advantage of, is that we're on this leading edge of, well, how does the world actually work? What's really going on? Rather than this sort of rape, pillage, kill, and steal world where we're just trying to make a living, and you know, there's no meaning to anything. We sort of live, as I call it, the Super Bowl of all stories, when you start to realize. So tonight, when I saw this thing that the military was actually getting people to go out of body to do targets, I mean, that's pretty significant, that they understand.
And they were doing that in the 1970s too, or whatever. It was the 70s, right?
And that's the whole thing why MK Ultra started. So people say, you know, there's evil government and whatever, but no, I think if you take a look at MK Ultra and all that sort of stuff, is they're doing what we would be doing, except they're looking at it from a military perspective. Is like this alien, because I tried to figure out, how did the Canadians know in 1950 that, or how did the Americans know to tell the Canadians in 1950 that mental phenomena was involved? Because nobody was talking to aliens. Nobody knew aliens were telepathic. The key was that in Roswell, there may have been a live alien, and it was talking in people's heads. So the military would look and say, this thing's talking in people's heads. And so they started to look at MK Ultra. Like, how does consciousness work? How do you talk in someone's head? And they were just trying to figure it out. So they're using LSD. I don't know why you'd use LSD, because basically you give, you know, 1,000 guys LSD, you just got 1,000 guys that don't go to Vietnam. I mean, they just don't have anything to do with it anymore.
Right.
And so the people saying, well, they're using LSD to brainwash people. Well, that's not going to brainwash anybody. And you see them just struggling to try to figure out how consciousness works. And then when you see that they're working with lucid dreams and out-of-body experience, and they're actually targeting people, that this is for real. I mean, I've heard the remote viewing, but when you see out-of-body experience, that's a whole different level of awareness as to how the world actually works, and that there is consciousness primary, and that you can actually take your consciousness, or I mentioned this one, I don't know if you've got this on tape yet, is this whole idea where Joe McMoneagle goes to England, or no, to Japan, and he's doing this finding missing people, and he gets 9 out of 20. And 2 of them weren't even in the country. One guy had died in Korea, and he found them like through this remote viewing thing. And that where he says to them that he can actually, the way remote viewing works is the same way that Dust that I put in contact modalities. It's the ability to shut down the sort of the left brain, the ego, the voice in the head, to empty the mind. And that's what he says. When I close my eyes, I empty my mind. That's all I do, and the target comes in. And so then when he goes there, he's doing these missing people. That's when he says to the crew, he says, "Oh, I can make my mind disappear." And they said, "No, it's not possible." So they take him to Nippon University, and he's with this top scientist who had worked with people doing meditating. And the guy said, "No, you're mistaken. I've worked with meditators for decades. Nobody can do that." And he said, he set it up, and he had a 128 channel thing. There were only 2 of them in the world where they can actually do brainstem, any movement in the brainstem and stuff like that, and any little thing. And he said, what you're going to see on the screen is you're going to see it go blank, and then you're going to see the channel turn on again. That will be the target coming in. And then he says, they do this thing, and they do the whole thing, and he goes through all this sort of stuff. And then he walks out of the room, and they're all just sort of staring at him. And he's going, what's going on? He said, watch the screen. And they show the screen. It's exactly what happens. They see all the systems going down. It's the screen is completely black, and then the signal comes in. And you see that kind of stuff. You start to understand that.
So you think that's the same thing with the theta brainwaves?
Well, theta, all your brain waves should disappear. That's like the near-death experience thing, where people say, you can't have a near-death experience, the brain was completely offline. You're remembering it after you woke up, and this sort of stuff. And this proves that thing, that you can have a completely flat EEG, no signal in the brain whatsoever, near-death experience, or Joe McDonald proving it, you can do it in a lab, and he's still conscious, he's still aware, and he's bringing in signals and whatever.
Right.
And so these are significant things that I think in terms of the world peace and stuff like that, we're going to hell in a handbasket, or environmentally, or whatever. But in terms of this stuff, I think we're really moving along. I mean, I'm pretty amazed at some of the stuff I've been reading. It's just a matter of getting it from you and I and Destin and a few other people knowing how this thing works, and moving it into the general public, where they suddenly realize, and that's an acclimatization thing, which sort of works like UFOs, where everybody goes, nah, I don't believe in UFOs, and then as soon as the New York Times article comes out, I always knew that. Everybody I knew that already. And that's the whole thing, is that's the way it works. It comes where it just gradually comes along, and then like gay marriage. Like, when did gay marriage become legal? And everybody goes, I don't know, it's like a while ago.
Yeah, right,
it just happens, and nobody really realizes it's happening. It just slowly comes, and then suddenly everybody accepts it as being fact.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's going to happen here, and the sooner the better, because then you start to understand more as to why we're here, what we're supposed to be doing here. Because I even asked Facebook, some guy was saying, oh, I talked to an alien and stuff like that, and I said, so what did he tell you, and why are you here? And I asked him directly, so why are you here? You know, because he was sort of disputing something. I said, and then he said, well, I think I'm here to help and stuff. And that's the whole thing. Why are you here? Nobody ever asked the question, like, what am I doing here? What's it all about? And that's what led to me for UFOs. I didn't realize that seeing a UFO flying across the sky and going, well, what's it doing, would lead to this. That's the big thing. That's the book I'm working on now, is the UFO School, where it starts as some UFO flying across, and then all the things I learned from 1975 till now, and almost nothing has to do with UFOs. Almost nothing. It's all this consciousness and all this kind of stuff, and it gets weirder, and it gets more spiritual, it gets more mystical, and it just moves along. And we just have to wait for other people to catch up, and probably will be with new kids, because new kids, they even had the thing out of here, this one about, people have this thing about fear when you're in a dream, the lucid dream state, with Stephen LaBerge, who ran the Stream Labs at Stanford, always told this story about the idea where you have these evil things that attack you and whatever, and he basically talks about this in the dream state, is if you get a big ugly alien or a devil comes to you in a dream, what you do is you go and you give him a big hug and a kiss, and he will turn into a positive being.
Right.
That you are sort of controlling.
It's all about love.
And so what we had this sort of, now you see these experiments. There was one done at the University of Alberta where they have these kids who play video games all day long. And we have the thing where you go into a dream and you're being chased by some evil thing, and they put these kids through this scenario, and what do? Oh, great! Let's shoot the bastard, and they all go after it. And that's a completely different mentality in terms of being chased in a dream. And because now they're used to this dream thing, that they're in a simulated reality, and you play the simulator, it's a game. Whereas we still think, this is happening to us, and that we aren't in control, and we're out of control and stuff like that. So I think we're I think we're making some progress in terms of where this thing is going, this consciousness thing, where more and more people are claiming they don't, but when it comes down to say, yeah, out-of-body experience is real or near-death experience is real, I'm just going, yeah, I knew that right.
Makes me wonder, I had a UFO sighting back in 2006.
Yeah.
Pretty profound. And if I hadn't had that sighting, I wouldn't be here right now.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder, did that happen so I'm here now and go and do the things that I do? Or,
Yeah.
you know, was it set up reverse or was it just chance? So
Well, that's the question that was asked me. Is it random or is it chance? Or the old idea, when I do, the book I want to eventually do is the idea of the theory of wow. Why do UFOs have lights on? We don't have lights on our plane. So why do they have lights on? So you can see them. I want you to see them. That's like, show it. I even make the joke about the whole thing with the Nimitz. Where the Nimitz, these things were there for a week before the Nimitz actually saw them. They were there and they were on and nobody paid any attention to them. And it's like, Zogar, you can't see us. Turn up the lights, they can't see us. These stupid guys, come on. And then suddenly, here they come, they're coming, come on, let's go. And they say, Zogar, you go under the water, make big, giant bubbles. They're coming. And the guy flies by, oh my God, there was something going under the water, there's big bubbles. And then I say, like, what I saw in 75 happened in 75, happened in the Nimitz thing, is I even said this in my lecture, and Jacques would have seen this in the lecture. I said the thing dropped from 80,000 feet down to sea level in 7/8 of a second. At like 43,000 miles an hour. So why would you drop from 80,000 feet down to sea level in 7/8 of a second? I mean, is that a pre-abduction maneuver or what? It's like they're showing off. It's called showing off. They're just like, watch this.
Yeah,
and they put the bubbles and stuff. And what happened in Canada, Jacques actually narrated this. Jacques Vallée actually narrated. In 1979, they did UFOs Past, Present, UFOs That Has Begun, which was the remake of UFOs Past, Present, and Future from 1975. And they have the Charlie Red Star case that got me involved. And Jacques Vallée narrates this thing. And the story's kind of screwed up as to what happened. But what happened was they had this thing on the ground in Carmen. And the night before, the TV crew from Winnipeg here, CKY TV, had been out there and they almost got it. But they didn't get any film. So they go back and the assistant producer said, man, we just about got it now. We're going back to tomorrow night. He said, bull you are. He said, I'm not paying any more overtime, you idiots. We're not getting any. You guys want to do UFOs? You want to go chase flying saucers? You can go on your own time. So I go, oh, okay. So they get a crew, a volunteer crew. And the guy that runs the camera has never shot a camera before in his life. And you remember in the 1970s, the TV cameras, these huge cameras, you know. So they take the camera out there, and this guy's a film producer. He's a film editor. He's never shot a camera before in his life. And so they got this thing on the road. And I don't know if you've been, the idea of mile roads. So you have mile roads. Every mile there's a road this way and a mile this way. So when you're moving around the countryside around Carmen, you can actually tell where you are. You can count how many mile roads you've moved along, whatever. So this thing is on the end of this mile road, and there's a big CBC tower, which is no longer there. It's a 900-foot tower, and they got the camera right by the tower, and this guy's on the main highway going out of Carmen, going north, and he's standing there, and then they see this thing is way down the road. And so they take, there's about 10 people, so they take one car, goes down this mile road, one goes down this mile road, and they're going to come across, they're going to sort of come in and figure out where it is and surround
because out there in Carmen, you have a good line of sight. You can see.
It's completely flat. Yeah, it's like a billiard table. I mean, there's nothing. And so they go down there, and the one guy comes around the car from the north, coming down the mile road north, comes across, and there it is. And they're like, oh shit, this thing! It's sitting like a movie screen, and there's a row of trees, like they have these tree things they put in to catch the snow and stuff. These trees, and then it's in behind the trees, and it's just sitting up on an angle like a movie screen, but it's not touching the ground, and it's blood red, and it's 50 feet high.
Wow.
And then they look around, and then they try to get their bearings. They're looking at microwave towers, like where are we, so we can come back in the morning to see this thing, and then they look back and the thing's gone, and they go, where'd it go? And they thought it had disappeared. Meanwhile, the guy's at the other end, and this is where he goes, is this random? Is this happening by accident? I didn't learn this for 35 years. So the guy's at the other end of the road, and he's looking through the viewfinder. Never shot a camera before in his life, and it's glowing up, it glows back down, it glows up, glows back down. He goes, they just about got something last night. I got to get something on camera. The next time it glows up, I'm going to shoot. And it was almost like the UFO said, "You ready?" It starts to glow up, and he pushes the camera, and the thing jumps in the air. It goes from ground level to, the rumored story was at that time, 5,000 feet in 3 frames. So 1/24th of a second. So in 1/8 of a second, it moves from the ground to 5,000 feet in 1/8 of a second. And the first frame, you see it on the first frame, it's on the ground, there's a ball sitting on the ground. The second frame, it's what we call a flash frame. All you see is the horizon, and you see these two huge humps of light. One frame, 1/24th of a second, these huge humps of light. In the third frame, the thing is at the top of the frame.
Wow.
And so then he's sitting there, and then it starts to move, and then he's tracking it going across the sky, and he gets to 12 o'clock, and he sees some stars, and then he figures, I need a frame of reference. So he stops the camera, and the thing flies through the thing, and then he tracks it again. All that happened was every time the camera was stationary, it picked up. So when it jumped, it picked it up, and when he stopped the camera at 12, direct north, it picked it up. So it had two 6-inch piece of films. They take it back to CKY, they throw it in the thing, and the guy he was a top CBC reporter, actually told me when I interviewed him, he said, it was backwards. I said, it's backwards. He said, I know what it sounds like. I'm telling you, it went across the sky, then it jumped in the air on the film before it was cut. He said, those assholes went and cut the film. He was furious that because they didn't see anything between, so they just cut the part out and they left these two 6-inch pieces of tape. Now the thing was, it was that random. So the guy is sitting there, and as he pushes the trigger, this thing jumps. It's almost like, because what happened was in February 1975 is when it started. So my friend says, we saw all the articles were in the Winnipeg papers. So we're going, oh cow, they got this thing out there.
Do you remember the date in February?
It would be about the middle of February. And so we say, so I said to him, we used to drive around Winnipeg, just doing nothing. You were just kids to drive around. I said, well, instead of driving around Winnipeg, why don't we drive out there and see what's going on? And my friend says, I have coffee with him all the time now. And I've known him for that time. So he says, yeah, okay, we can go. And we never went. So then, in May of the 11th, I think it was, when they got this film, that's when the guy says, you know, next time it goes up, I'm going to take the shot. It jumps in the air. That went viral. CKY did a documentary. NBC picked it up. They gave the guy $50, told him, keep your mouth shut. Because the guy didn't get paid for the film. Suddenly it's a viral film all around the world. It was the best nocturnal light film ever taken. This thing jumping in the air. Jacques Vallée's narrating it on a documentary and stuff like this. And then I'm thinking to myself, that's why it got caught on film. It's the only time I've ever heard a UFO get caught on the ground. Because I would never have gone if it had not been for that film going viral in Winnipeg and them doing the documentary and saying,
wow,
oh, we got this thing. Then I said, come on, let's go see what they're looking at. That's why we went out. I never would have gone out if it hadn't been for that thing. And then I'm going back, that wasn't random. That wasn't. They wanted me out there. That's why they jumped when this guy had the camera. He's like, you know, he never shot a camera,
wow,
and he had 12 inches of film, and it became the most famous film ever. So you see this whole thing about the randomness where you start wondering, like, there's no way, or the thing with the phone call. There's been lots of stories like that where, you know, you get these bizarre sort of synchronicities where they're just lining stuff up for you. And when you look back, it's easier to see when you're looking back than looking ahead. When you look back, you say, oh, I see why that happened or whatever. Or Desta and I connecting and stuff like that. And you see this stuff and you go like, nah, this is, you know, this is not that random. Almost like the Newton stuff. I don't know if you've ever read Michael Newton. That's a book you can't die till you've read Michael Newton. It's called Journey of Souls. It's the ultimate book. And that's the whole idea is that we all may have sat down before we were born, and we said, hey, we're going to come to Winnipeg, we're going to have this meeting, we're going to do these tapes, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and we plan all this stuff, and that's what the whole thing, and you start seeing more and more of this all the time, this idea that we plan to have these encounters, and that things aren't as random as we think. It may not be totally no, you know, everything out of your control, no free will, but it definitely isn't random. When you start looking back on the things that have happened and the synchronicities or the bizarre thing with the apports, where you see that story where it just went on for weeks and it was like, whoa. Or I don't know if you know the story, I should tell that story. The part of the apport story.
the feather one?
Well, the feather story, there's a more, and I can't really explain. Have you ever done PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Okay. So this happens at the same time. We have the thing with the guy where he's put the apports in Winnipeg. This happens all at the same time. Where I'm going to Laughlin. I'm there a couple days early. I'm researching and I see this, and then the feather thing happens a couple days later at the conference and stuff like that. And so at that conference, then I'm doing my PowerPoint, and I'm pretty sure it was the same conference. I'm doing PowerPoint, and I usually have like audios, videos, and stuff. I got it all set up. I got it on the table in the hotel room, and then I take the stick And I've done this like 150 times. Take the stick, save as. Do you wanna link the files? Yeah, link the files, because you gotta link them, otherwise your audios and your videos don't work. You got no, it doesn't, you know. So then I get the stuff and I go and Paula says, you got to do it right away. We're going to the Chinese restaurant or the Italian restaurant. You come to the Italian restaurant. I said, well, I got to do my presentation. And what you do is before is you go up and you take your little stick and you put it in the guy's computer, because they want it on their computer rather than your computer. And I go up there, and then the first question the guy was asking, you got any audios, any videos? Yeah, but number 12, go down 12 slides, and we got the audio here. And he opens this thing up, and it's like, look at it, like, what the hell's going on here?
Uh-oh.
And it's like, slides doubled, tripled, and you know how you get like a 3x4 or a 16x9 is the wide screen, and it's like they're taking the 3x4, or they're taking the 16x9 and made it 3x4s, so they get these things are stretched, and he's going, what are you doing? I'm going, what the hell's going on here? And I'm looking at this, I said, well, let's go to the audio, and I go, and so I'm clicking down, I said, well, there's an audio here, and I'm clicking down, the audio's gone, and I said, there's another one down here, audio's gone again. I go, what the hell's going on here? And he says, well, you just made a mistake. I said, I've done PowerPoint. I did not do this. It's like all doubles. There's at least 40, 50 slides that are doubled up and tripled up. And they're all distorted. And the one we have with Tony Bintz, the whole thing with the helicopters, with all these people with helicopters, with UFOs in the helicopters, low-flying helicopters. So I got this one, and the thing's sideways. And the helicopter's flying sideways. I'm going, what the hell? And then I said, I can guarantee you, I know what I'm doing. I know how to do PowerPoint. And he said, and he said, well, what do you want to do? I said, I got to reload this thing. And I said, well, hang on, I got to get it out. And I said, I'm going to go back to the hotel. I'm going to go back to the room. It's sitting on my desk. Still, the computer's on. So I go racing back, and Paul says to me, he says, are you coming are you coming to the restaurant? I said, I got something wrong with my PowerPoint. I got to go reload it. He says, well, you know what's happening. I said, no, that's not what's happening. And I go, I'm mad as hell. I'm going back to my room. I go in there, and I take everything off the stick. Nothing on the stick. I said, no, want anything. And then I look on the screen, completely normal. And I go, okay. So I put it in there, and I go really slow on the steps, you know, make sure link the files and stuff like that, and I go through. And then I said, okay, I'll take one that's got, I'll take the audios out. Because when we played it through, the audios were gone, and then we go to another slide down lower, and suddenly the audio's on. And it's on a different slide, and I go, that's not even possible, because you know when you link the slide, it'll link it to the slide, and it's on a different slide, and I'm going, what the hell's going on here? So I take one without the audios. I take the audios out, and I say, I can wing it without the audios. I don't need the audios. I can sort of make it up or whatever. And then I go up there, and then he says, well, I think we got it going. I said, oh, wow. And we go in the back, and he opens his computer in the back, the same bullshit. And then I said, okay, I got another one here. I loaded it again, and then we go up there, put it on, same damn thing. I go, what? Get out of here. And then I'm suddenly thinking, like, this is like the ultimate report. This is like bullshit. I couldn't believe what's going on. I said, how do you do that? I'm just thinking, how do you do that? How do they do this? I mean, because then I assumed it was them, eh? And then he says, well, what do you want to do? I said, just delete all the double slides. I'll wing the rest of it. So that when I went up, I had to apologize when I started the thing. I said, I know what's going to happen today.
Someone's messing with us.
But we'll wing it and there was a couple things that something was wrong with the thing, but I just went over it. I just pretended.
Did you have weird things that happened before the PowerPoint that similar?
No. Well, I had the thing with a couple days before was the thing where this professor guy was saying all these reports disappeared, and I sent them to the University of Manitoba. And then the feather thing started, and there was so many things that were just weird stuff. Or when I went to it started a week before when I was in LA. I was talking to Ray Hernandez, and we were stuck at LAX, and then he's saying I didn't even know reports existed. I had no idea what they were, and like a week before it starts. So I went with Ray Hernandez, and then he says, I said, Ray, we're waiting for an Uber, and it took like half an hour for an Uber to come. I said, Ray, what's your weirdest case? You got all these weird people. I mean, you talked. He said, oh, what's the guy's name? You probably know the guy's name. So Julian Hernandez. Anyway, his main guy. So he says, oh, he's the weirdest. Him and his wife and his daughter, and they've got all this stuff happening. And so I says, and he says, he's got these port things appearing. I said, a port? Port? What's that? And he says, oh, these things fall out of the sky. He's got swords falling out of the sky, and swords. Swords, yes, swords. All this like huge things coming out, and he's got this collection. the stuff. He's got this cabinet with all these things that have appeared. And I said, apports, is that what they're called? Apports? And he said, yeah, they're manifestations and apports. So things are moved around where you hear, have people UFO experience, and then they go home after the UFO experience, and something goes flying across the room, or Tony would talk about keys flying across the room, or doors slamming, and all this kind of stuff.
Or stones falling from the ceiling.
Yeah,
You're a geller,
yeah. This whole thing. So this is apports and manifestation. I'd never heard of this kind of stuff. So that was a week, and then when I went, and then I was looking it up because I'm there a couple days before the conference. I'm in the hotel next to there, and I'm looking up apports. And that's when I come across this guy. He says, "Oh, I lost this whole collection," and I sent my collection of apports to the University of Manitoba. And I'm like, "Right, University of Manitoba, that's where I worked for 37 years. I can't believe I'm working on apports." And suddenly,
That's crazy.
and I'm trying to figure out this thing, and then the feather thing starts, and then this thing with the computers happens, and it was this whole bizarre thing. It was like this,
Weird
almost like the Nimitz
synchronicities.
thing. It was like this big show where your head is just spinning when it's all over. Because I remember the last feather thing. Well, I won't get the whole feather thing, but it went like, there was 15 people or something like that, 12 events, and then we go. Desta and I are in Tucson. And she wants to go to this church, and I'm really not that keen on it. Oh, whatever, let's go to church. So we go to this church, some old church from 200 years ago, whatever. And we go through, we take photos and walking around or whatever. And then she wants to go to the gift shop, and okay, well, we go to the gift shop. And so I figure, okay, I'm gonna go in the gift shop, and I'll just look around while she's shopping or whatever. And then I look, and here's this big giant card, these cards, big giant card with this woman with these feathers. She's holding these feathers. I go, that's kind of weird. So I keep picking it up, and I hear feathers again. So I pick it up, and I said, I'm not gonna buy the card.
It was like a picture, a big
It was a
postcard?
big card. These cards are about like $2.98, and they're about this big, like big greeting cards. And this woman's got these feathers. She's holding these white feathers, and I go, feathers again? So I said, well, I'm not gonna buy it. So I take it, and I photographed this card, and then I put the card down, and I looked at one below. It's got a green catcher thing, these Aboriginal green catcher. And it's got all these feathers. I'm going, more feathers. And I take it up, and I click the thing, and I take a picture, and I put it down, and I look, there's Desta standing there with a feather. And I said, get out of here. I said, feather, get out of here. It says, I was standing outside waiting for you, and it fell from the sky and landed on my foot.
Yeah.
I mean, you get that kind of stuff, and you go, it doesn't get weirder than that.
No, it's a weird world, man. Wow, it's been a great conversation, Grant. Holy smokes, where we go? We went from psychics to remote viewing.
It's all connected. That's the
Yeah,
thing. That's why we call the company. You do my book covers, and it's called It's All Connected.
It's all connected publishing, right on.
And it is all connected. And it's an honor to playing the game, and we'll do some more stuff down the road and have some more stories to tell. Maybe we'll talk about something else.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a fun part of the Super Bowl.
Part of the Super Bowl, yeah. We're in the, as I like to end like this, where people say, some people don't even know the Super Bowl's going on. They're outside the thing. We're actually in the stadium. We're not in the stands. We're actually on the field with maybe the water boy, the quarterback, whatever. But we actually got to play. And that now the joke I make is that 500 years from now, Matt, somebody's going to be regressed, and they're going to say, oh, I was there when the UFO thing started. And the skeptic's going to say, well, you were. Next, you're going to say you're Cleopatra. You weren't there. Everybody says they were there when the UFO thing started. Well, we actually were there when the UFO thing started.
That's right. It's
Thanks.
fun to be a part of the Super Bowl. Thanks, Grant.
Okay.
Cheers.